Hey everyone, we're going to start talking about how to do linear regression models, and sometimes on the regions, um, they describe them as like I'm underlining an equation of the line of best fit. So very often when you do one of these, they're going to give you sets of points. And in this case, we have 10 coordinates. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to, and I'll put the buttons down here. You press the stat button. And the first thing you got to do is click on edit. That's the first step of what you're going to do. Now you'll see on mine I already kind of put the numbers in. We do stat and then enter. And then what you do is you put the first row in L1. So I have all the numbers in here, all 10 numbers from my table. And then you go to and do the same thing for L2. Now some of the things to look out for, make sure you have the same amount in each column. Otherwise you'll get a mismatch error. And always double check it, make sure you didn't miscount something or put something in twice. So for a linear regression, what you're going to do after you type all your numbers in is you press the stat button again. So I'm going to go ahead and press the stat button. And then you're going to hit the arrow button on the D-pad. And then you're going to pick the one that says linear regression, which is number 4. So go down to 4. And then you hit enter on calculate. And you're going to see a group of numbers. Okay, we got 4 different values. All of them are decimals. We got A, B, R squared, and R. Okay, so what they want us to do in question 2, it says they want us to round the slope to the nearest hundredth and the y-intercept to the nearest integer. So this is your equation, y equals ax plus b. And a is the slope and b is the y-intercept. So they want slope to the nearest hundredth. So I need 2 numbers for that, which would be y equals 1.16, because there's a 2 past it. And then my y-intercept to the nearest integer would be 19. Okay. So we're not going to do the slope from less than 6 because we're not doing that lesson. So that's our equation. And then what we're going to have to do is generally, they want us to either to model what the question's about or use the equation in different parts. So I'm going to move this back here. So for part C, it says explain what the y-intercept of this model represents. And we need to know what the question's about. So on the table, it says that x is the low temperature and y is the high temperature. So the y-intercept 19 represents a high when we have a low of 0. So that point would be 0, 19 on the calculator. When we have a low temperature of 0, the high temperature would be 19. And then for the slope, the 1.16, that's our change in the range of temperatures. So this is the change or the increase in the spread between those low and high temperatures. Okay. Now this is one of the common ways that they ask for regression models on the regions. They could ask for the context of what the intercept and slope. And then the second one, which we're going to do, the other thing they generally ask for and we'll see that as we get through each of the parts, is we're going to go ahead and we'll have to use the equation to figure out certain values, whether they have to deal with the x value or y value. So I'm going to pause this and I'm going to come back with the table put into my calculator. Alright, so I have everything inputted into my calculator, and if you don't know how to clear the list out, what you got to do is you would go up to the top of the list, kind of like see where I highlighted up here L1, and what you do is you hit clear and enter, and then you have to do the same thing on L2, hit clear and enter. So if you need to remove the numbers, okay, you want to hit the clear button and then the enter button on L1 and L2. So, good thing to know because you'll be doing a couple more of these later on. And so what we're going to do right now, I'm going to go back to Stat and Calc, and I'm going to go to number 4. Looks like they want us in this question to round both. It'll always tell you what to round to, the nearest tenth. They want us to round both to the nearest tenth. So I'm going to go ahead and... So, and it says they want us to list what the variables x and y represent. Okay, so we're going to have for this, and I'm going to use y and x because I talked about that in the question. So we got ax plus b. Now we got negative 8.1, because I got to round that 9 to a 1, x, plus 68.1. Now they want us to say what these represent. So first off, that y-intercept. The y-intercept is 68.1, and that represents the mileage if a car had no weight, which really probably would be something they wouldn't ask you on the Regents, because this one's talking about the weight in thousands of pounds, and as you can see by the slope, it's going down. And then the slope is negative 8.1, so the slope is negative 8.1, and that means your mileage is decreasing for every 1,000. It's decreasing 8.1 miles per gallon for every 1,000 pounds. That gets added onto the weight. Now B talks about the scatter plot, and this would be a negative correlation. But we're not actually going to do the scatter plot. This is a negative correlation, and you can tell that from the slope. So the slope's a negative value, which means that this is going to be decreasing. So it will look something like this if you were to do a graph for it. Okay, and that kind of goes into what we just talked about. That would kind of answer C as well. And then for D and E, I'm going to move this up and I'm going to erase some of the stuff that I already wrote. I'm going to leave the equation because the equation we're going to need for this. So it said if a car had a weight of 4,300 pounds. Okay, so going back up to my table, they have those in a decimal form. So I can't put 4,300 in, but I can put in 4.3, which would be equivalent to that. So if I do negative 8.1 times 4.3 plus 68.1, I could figure out what the fuel efficiency is going to be, which is the y value, by typing that into the equation. So I got negative 8.1 parentheses so based on that, and it said round answer to the nearest integer. So that would mean that if I had that much weight, I would expect to get 33 miles per gallon. And if we wanted to purchase a car that got 40 miles a gallon, what weight will we need? So again, that's your fuel efficiency. So if you go back up, that's the Y value, the mileage we talked about. So if I was doing that one, and I wanted to get 40 miles to the gallon, what I'd have to do is I'd have to substitute the 40 in, and then I would have to solve for x. So I could solve for x by subtracting 68.1 on each side. And then I would have to divide each side by negative 8.1. So in this case, it'd be negative 28.1 divided by negative 8.1, which to the nearest tenth, or in this case, this would be x would have to be 3.5, or in this case, 3,500 pounds. So if I had a car that weighed that much, I would expect to get 40 miles to the gallon. So like we talked about before, make sure you use the stat section of the calculator, okay? And it's important to understand when you read what the variables represent in the question, because they're going to ask for the context, and they also might ask, like in D and E, they might ask you or give you values to substitute in for one of the two variables.